Hello and welcome to the main event, your Champions League history show on Heart and Hand. We've reached the end of a three-part series on 99-2000. So much to get into in the past couple of weeks, and we still have more on the menu tonight. Good evening, Adamski.
Good evening. Yeah, it's been a bit of a saga. I'm sure glad we're not recording these one after the other because that would be a very long evening.
Mental, wouldn't it? Absolutely mental. And Davey Edgar's here as well.
Yes, no, nobody would be that crazy, surely. But listen, at the end of the day, football was a lot of fun to talk. The problem with these shows is once they're finished, I always want to go and watch a Champions League game. Like I want a really, because we've talked about where you get these great sides meeting each other, and I always, that'd be great right now. So I'll need to wait till what, March really before we get to that.
I was thinking that during the last show, the second show, when we were talking about all the goals, and then I was thinking about how great Euro 2000 was as well, and it actually got me quite excited for the Euros, which will have started by the time that this comes out. So hopefully, I'm still as excited as I was then. Yeah.
Well, who knows? Who knows what's happening in the future? But we do know what happened in the past. Let's take our two finalists then in their semi-final route, Adam. Valencia, they've impressed, obviously, from the start. Didn't impress Hugh Keevins, of course, famously at the start of the season, who described them as the Aberdeen of Spain, because they had started La Liga slowly, as Aberdeen had done that particular season, and also set Rangers up for failure. But they had certainly moved on, and that absolute spanking of Lazio sets things really into overdrive as they have an all-Spanish semi-final against Barcelona. Before we get into the game, how are they doing this? Has anyone else got a diamond? And I'll talk a wee bit about Hector Cúper, I suppose. But that team, first of all, Adam, how are they managing this?
I think as we maybe spoilers slightly on the last show, it is all about that diamonds. It's very, very tight, very well drilled. I think they relied a lot on the creativity of Keely Gonzalez for me. Most of their goals, I think, either came down that side or he was certainly involved in it. He was one of their key players further back, if you like, getting the ball up there. Once it was up there, we mentioned guys like Angulo and Lopez, who are more than capable up there. But I would say Hector Cúper is very interesting. We mentioned Valencia being no mugs. It's maybe a little bit of a surprise that they were no mugs, given that they've only had one season before that this season in the European Cup, which was 71-72, where they played a few knockout rounds, didn't really amount to very much. It's interesting though, because again, you think what a great season or a great 2 seasons, unprecedented, but the fans were not happy with Cúper just a few months before this, February 2000. There was chance of Cúper out, and it was only really this run in the knockout stages that sort of turned the tide of opinion, but he did not have a good relationship with the fans. And I think it's all the more surprising, I guess, that you look at the team and they were such a well-drilled, well-oiled outfit that it's hard to believe that there was anybody that didn't want him to be the manager. Ranieri actually picked him as his manager when he left. He left to go to Atletico Madrid for a season before Chelsea, wasn't it? Yeah. And he picked Hector Cúper, who had done very, very well. He'd got in Mallorca. Of all teams, he'd got them to third the season before, one place above Valencia, who finished fourth and therefore qualified for the Champions League, as we mentioned a couple of shows ago. So yeah, they brought him in. It seemed like a pretty sensible pick. He was a guy that could work his magic, work with what he had, and make them better, as he did with Mallorca. And he did very well. There, it was very Italian, I guess. It's no surprise he ended up at Inter, but it was very not very Spanish, I think, in its roots. Obviously, Cúper is Argentinians, so there was lots of hard work and compactness and physicality that I guess both Argentina and maybe Italy at that time was kind of known for. So there was a lot of that in there. They had a great goalkeeper, Santiago Canizares. I think I mentioned Farinos, who maybe isn't well remembered. I certainly just assumed that Ruben Barasha was there for both seasons, but he wasn't. He joined in summer 2000, and he gave them, like I said, he gave them a bit more. What would you say? A bit more style, I guess. Back there, Farinos was maybe a bit more of a ball winner, whereas Barasha could be a bit of a playmaker. So that sort of changed them up in the second season. But in that first season, Farinos was in there, and the quality for me was certainly the two wider central midfielders, if you like, although it was pretty fluid, and it was obviously Keylor Gonzalez and Gaizka Mendieta. But yeah, overall, I would say they were defensively well organised, very disciplined. They were really, really effective on the counter attack, and it was just a bit of a perfect marriage for them, because that just summed up what they needed to be, particularly in the Champions League, and it's probably what got them that relative success in Liga as well. Teams would not expect Valencia to, I guess, play the way that they did, or they would try and attack them, and it meant that they could pick them off on the break, as they did to very great effect. Cúper was, I think we mentioned on another show as well, he wasn't afraid to play some older players as well. Again, something that's maybe quite an Italian thing, and you can see the attraction maybe Inter with their squad at the time when they got him as manager a couple of years after, because Carboni, Angloma, who else is a couple of others that were closer to 40 than 30 when he was manager there, and you wouldn't think it. I mean, I'd have thought, I know Angloma played for he won the cup, European Cup in France, but I'd have had him as mid-20s at this point watching the games, never mind the mid-30s that he was, given how fit he was and how up and down he was. He was a fantastic player. So he was one of those guys, obviously, that was able to use his man management and his fitness training, etc., to get players to play better, play longer than they had before. So it was a perfect match for them. And despite some of the fans being football fans, I guess, and stamping their feet when this run-in started happening, I think everybody soon shut up a little bit and just let him work his magic. So yeah, really, really interesting team. And I'm not sure many were playing this style at the time.
Yeah, Angulo, was he a direct option? Because obviously Claudio Lopez wasn't. Claudio Lopez is very smart, very quick, very elusive. We had seen him with Argentina at the World Cup in France. Anglo wasn't quite a target man, because John Carew comes in soonish and would give them a certainly direct focal point. Don't really remember them ever being particularly direct, because he didn't really need to be.
He reminded me of, this is not a reference I would have made before we did these shows, so I'm kind of quite thankful of it, but he reminded me of Salinas at Barcelona.
That's a really good shout.
8 years before, kind of,
yeah.
Not necessarily a target man, but physical and pacey, and could run the channels and can hold it up. I can't think of a more recent example. That might be a bit of a weird one, but he reminded me of someone like that, just like a good foil, maybe Balbo as well, that we mentioned on the previous shows. They are just someone that can do some of those things without being one-dimensional. So yeah, I think you're not far off.
But Carew is more direct, right?
Yeah, definitely. He's like 9 foot, isn't he? So
yeah.
Carew was really, really physical. Carew's, much closer to modern number 9, actually. Lazy bastard in his later days, but when he was starting out, he was something special.
Davey, again, I know we can go into more detail on other shows on the network here. I did kind of take the Keevins bait as I travelled to Spain for that opening game. And this is a good Rangers team, right? They've just won the treble, probably the most aesthetically able Rangers team we've ever seen. And in it, absolutely more than in it after that first half, as we talked about last week. But it was the second half, and I don't remember really how it looked on telly, but certainly from away up in the gods as we were, I don't think I'd ever really seen a team do this to Rangers. Not even Juventus, which was all it was their athleticism as well as their technique that were kind of allied to really just run over the top of us. This was pulling players out of position and then using the space, and it was Keegan Gonzalez and Gaizka Mendieta constantly just triangles. And I think it wasn't what I obviously went to see and wanted to see, but it's probably the first lesson I can remember kind of getting. Just watching a team do this to us, and a good Rangers team. And they would do it and do it and do it. It's just control, total control.
Yes, that's exactly it. I think we mentioned last week that they were almost a precursor of that modern Spanish ability to choke you, because they used space in a way that we didn't. The Juventus game that you mentioned there is quite interesting. That's a Rangers team that drank 14 pints the weekend before, coming up against a Juventus team that have different stimulants in their body, right? This is a good range, and tactically that Rangers team didn't have a fucking clue, right? I mean, let's be honest about it. Tactics to them were give the ball to Paul and Brian. This, though, is a good Rangers team. It's a team that's been together a year. It's really well drilled, and it is good, but it's tactically aware. It's shown that in Europe. It's been to Germany and won. It's a good side, and they are what the hell is happening to us here. And of course, being Rangers fans, that first leg, I just thought that we had been rotten. The second game, though, was the one, because, we've shown a bit more by this in Europe, right? And we're clearly a decent side. I remember, I'm glad you made that point, because it's spot on. See their ability to hunt in threes, and then to always have two men available, always, all the time, against a Rangers side that did know where it was supposed to be. A Rangers side that was fit, that did work hard, that did have confidence to take the ball in tight situations, all of these things. That was so impressive. And that's why, as I said, I didn't leave the ground that night raging, even though we lost. Disappointed, obviously, but I really felt we'd given it a go. Lesson is exactly the word. You're spot on. I could not give you more. This was a side who were playing and doing things that were so incredibly, or certainly felt to me, incredibly innovative, where players were moving in tandem, in blocks, constantly, and they were always available. I mean, it was so impressive. Also, that it's become a Pep signature, hasn't it? When they gave the ball away, they won it back within a few seconds. That they were straight into the tackle, but without giving up position, because the person who goes to tackle, it was immediately filled in by whoever's job it was to fill in when that person went to tackle. And they were so hard to get a transition on. And that's still a key part of any football match. They were so difficult to get a transition on, because they filled space, and they use space to squeeze you and to make it very difficult. And they do, as you said, as we're watching them throughout this campaign, they're doing it to fabulous teams. And they just had an ability to always have spare men, not man. And they work the ball at such a pace, at such a technical level. It's just, I think it's an absolutely, this 2 years of this Valencia side is one of the most complete jobs of management. That is a squad where every single person is in tandem and in harmony with the other guys in the team. It's really impressive.
The only thing I could probably liken it to is the Lyon game in 2007 at Ibrox, in terms of what I thought was a bit of a chastening experience. And I think that one probably gets overlooked, I guess, because we did really well that season in Europe, obviously getting to the final, but then also we turned Lyon over 3-0 as well. So you've not got that. There's a sting there, absolutely, but
and Benzema's star quality that people just go, oh well, it was Benzema.
Yeah, there was no great surprise, I guess, about it, because Lyon were fantastic at that time. But that, in terms of that lesson that you talk about and getting pulled apart and thinking, oh dear, we're in for something here. There haven't been many other ones that I can remember like that, which I guess is a good thing.
Well, Barcelona, Adam, is the semi-final opponent. I guess a big brother. Barcelona maybe just starting to slow down in this season, and yet again, Valencia at home for the first leg. Yet again, they get a start that seems to be what everything's kind of predicated on. Barcelona are back through an OG, but the score at halftime is 3-1 to Valencia. Claudio Lopez makes that pretty out of sight in injury time to make it 4-1. Gaeth Mendieta scores first in the Nou Camp. Barcelona win on the night, but it's absolutely dead and buried. And again, it's this explosive ability in moments to just take what could be, should be, some would say, a cagey encounter with so much at stake, just on its head and out and done.
Yeah, 100%. I think the big difference for me in this first game was Keely Gonzalez. I think he set up 2, maybe 3 of the goals we mentioned. They're coming from that left hand side, and Gulo getting 2, and Claudio Lopez with the injury time one to really, I guess, put the seal on it, because again, important times to score goals, because they get a goal just before half time, Mendieta's penalty just after half time, which makes them 3-1, and then you're probably still thinking 3-1, going back to the Nou Camp. Who knows what's going to happen? And then 92nd minute, Claudio Lopez scores to make it very, very difficult. As it turns out, they end up going to 5-1. On
Is
it.
that
So
the
yeah,
post, Adam? Given the Chelsea franticness and the kind of wild, chaotic nature of that, again, a team that, as we just talked about, has far more control than, as much as we love that Chelsea team that they have. This is maybe coming for Barcelona, no?
yeah, I think it's that clash of styles thing, as well, because it also probably doesn't help that it's a all Spanish game, because Barcelona have then got those prejudices of they've been nowhere before last season. We know all about them. We know them inside out. They've got that pressure. They've always got the pressure, Barcelona, but that pressure from inside the country of you should really be dealing with this and getting to the final quite comfortably here. And then Valencia just sort of turn it on their head. So if they're Barcelona are maybe expecting Valencia to weather the storm a little bit and play their counter-attacking football and let them puff themselves out, and Valencia just turn it in their heads and get their early goal again. And then you can just imagine, I can't claim to have watched loads and loads and loads of Valencia games, but you just imagine that is the type of team, type of manager, type of setup that you get if you go a goal down to, you are in for some serious trouble. It's not a Man United type thing where, what was it, 30 odd times they went a goal down and come back and won. If you're going to go down to Valencia, particularly at this time, I think any team is struggling, so that gives them that belief that they can go out and get that fast start and then just sit and and then pick a team off on the break, which they absolutely did here.
Yeah, I did see a lot of Valencia this season. By the way, does anyone remember Revisitor La Liga?
Yeah.
Bring it back. I don't always go on about the past, but that's one thing we should be bringing back. But anyway, they were tremendous at this, but they really felt they had the upper hand over Barcelona. And it's so interesting because then they'll get to the final and fill their draws because it's Real Madrid. The amazing that the history of fixtures against clubs, what it can do to you. But again, I go back to a point that we discussed last week, which is, Martin, you mentioned the Mestalla being wild, in a crazy place. There's a sense of, yes, we are going to win this, and their fans turn up prepared to play their part. They're not nervous. There's not. Do you remember the first leg, lads, against Fiorentina at Ibrox? Which, can you remember anything from that match? Nobody can, because it was a weird, quiet atmosphere. Whereas, because we were so nervous, whereas the Leipzig game, we just turned up and they went for it, and it was wild. And that's what Valencia did with having the home ties. I think that they turned up, we have a part to play, and the team responded to it, and took them apart. See that fourth goal? That is, I just think, from Barcelona, that's so unprofessional. You're still in it, and psychologically, you've just got to get out there 3-1. 3-1, you're still in it. Psychologically, that fourth, it's flipping the price point from $9.99 to $10, isn't it? It just registers different. And I just think Barcelona have got to shut that down, and they don't.
Is there maybe that thing I mentioned there about pride or embarrassment that, I mean, you think we always give the example of I can't think of many teams domestically that Rangers should defend a lead against, say, or go into the corner against and try and pass the time away. Barcelona, I think, being 3-1 down and being that type of team, I guess the natural reaction is we've got to go and get goals here. We can't sit back and just take a 3-1 loss. So maybe they just get caught between two stools.
I think it's a great point, Adam. I think you're absolutely spot on. That would they have done it against Liverpool, say? No, they would have shut it down and said, right, we've had a bit of a tanking, but it's 3-1. We'll take them back to the new camp. It's because it's Valencia. You're absolutely right. And it's like, well, it's Valencia. We'd be expected if it was a league game. And you fall into patterns, don't you? You fall into, they've all played there that season.
Yeah.
And they go into it.
Just that mindset, though. I mean, I know what you mean, that the opposition will modulate it a wee bit, but it's 3-1. There's a big difference between 3-1 and 4-1, but there's also a big difference between 3-1 and 3-2, because if they get that second, they're then going into a very noisy new camp and they're winning. They're going to the final. And it just seems, when you look at how they've played, it is front foot, total belief. But you're absolutely right, Davey. The more pragmatic viewer, and I think the two of us would be saying, well, you've done this. Chelsea aren't Valencia, right enough. You got a hell of a harder task on your hands. But even then, I'm still not sure 3-1 would have done it. Anyway,
3-1 might not have 4-1.
Oh, 4-1 games done.
Try and get a second. Absolutely, it's great if you can get a second, but the first priority, and maybe that is just mindset, that we have. But I think at 4-1, and I think the feeling was at 4-1 that it was done.
Yeah. So on the other side, Adam, Real Madrid, your favourites, not a good season. John Toshak kind of into hold jackets, really. He goes, Vicente Del Bosque comes in and eventually kind of gets something going. I'll ask you about him in a moment. Let's look at their semi-final against Bayern, a proper heavyweight Champions League semi-final. And tension and edge and momentum and everything you kind of want. A fast start, we've got one here, Nicolas and Anelka putting them ahead. There's an OG, and Bayern back in it at home. They I think Castellanco scores early-ish in Munich to throw this back, and it's Anelka again. Not a particularly Nicolas Anelka goal, right enough, but he equalises, and again that pretty much finishes. Bayern do win 2-1, but it's not enough. I remember those games being particularly exciting. The Valencia thing's done, but I remember that Munich tie, the second leg, being edgy and like a kind of proper. This is what you're asking for, heavyweights to kind of go the distance. That's what that felt like. A wee bit of love for the incredible Sulk.
Yeah, it's. I was gutted when he left Arsenal. I'm sure, like I said, not a massive Real Madrid fan. It wasn't necessarily that he was going there. It was just the fact that he wouldn't get to play. They didn't play. Anelka and Henry didn't play together, did they? That was the same. Yeah, the same summer. So I don't think they played at all. So that was something that I was sort of missing out on that. Not that I don't think anybody thought Thierry Henry was going to be anywhere near as good as he was when he joined. But looking back in hindsight, getting 23 million for Anelka that they signed for a couple of years before for 300 grand and spending half of that on Henry. I'm sure there would have been a few raised eyebrows at the time, but it absolutely turned out to be some great business. But anyway, yeah, I digress. I thought Anelka had a really good season here before the inevitable sulks again started happening. Yeah, it's just quite funny, I guess, for a player that young to be so huffy, because he's still only 21, 22 at this point. He didn't have the best season at Madrid, certainly not domestically, but you can't really argue that. You can argue that not many of them did. You only ended up with a couple of goals in La Liga, and maybe not much more in the Champions League, but played his part certainly in this in these rounds, like you mentioned, he got the 2 goals. I think this might be his only 2 goals in the whole tournament, and it's the 2 goals in the semi-final, which effectively put them through. You're spot on about the types of goals. I think I don't imagine I know I said I was a fan of Carsten Janker. I can't imagine in my mind's eye thinking he would score the type of goal that he scored there, which was a kind of fallen volley, and then similar with Anelka, with a goal that Carsten Janker would have been proud of as well. But yeah, very very much tighter, I think, and more enjoyable. 2-0 in the first game, like you said, but then Bayern getting the early goal makes it absolutely game on, and even Anelka scoring, it doesn't put it too far away. And again, we talk about goals at crucial times. Elber getting that goal 5 minutes or so after half time sets it up for a finish that maybe probably deserved a few more goals than it got. But yeah, I think overall we can't really argue with Madrid going through. I think they certainly were the better of the two.
David, just very quickly on Anelka before we move on to look at how this Real Madrid team has been assembled, thrown together, whatever you want to call it. Not exactly a dreadful career. 2 Premier League titles, Serie A, Champions League, 3 FA Cups, European Championships with France. But I think because of the personality, because of the constant move, and because of some of the clubs that he played for near the end of his career, it still seems like a waste, because this boy was frightening. He was the Henry before Henry took that mantle and did it professionally and with more longevity, etc., etc.
Yeah, he was, and he was so exciting when he burst through. People might forget that, but when he first came through at Arsenal, he just looked absolutely incredible, and you just thought, well, there's nothing he can't do. He was strong, he was incredibly quick, and he was a top drawer finisher. And you just thought, at this level, what can he go on and achieve? His personality kind of held him back. If he could have left his personality at the door, I think. His family weren't. Didn't his brother end up owning Wraith Rovers or something for a bit? Yeah.
His advisors.
Yeah.
His brothers, yeah.
His advisors, his brothers, yeah. And it was a little bit of an odd situation there. And I think he goes to Real too soon. He's too young, and he wasn't emotionally ready for it. And we'll get bursts of that talent throughout his career, Martin. We'll get some at PSG, we'll get some at Liverpool, Chelsea. Even at Manchester City, Chelsea. We'll always get. He would always drag you back in, wouldn't he? Whenever you were just ready to criticise him, he would always pull something off. But he was. He didn't achieve what he should have, but look at the clubs he played for. There was a reason that he was at that level, because he had supreme amounts of ability. A little bit like Michael Owen in that sense. They both burst through at the same time.
Yeah, he just athletically better.
Yeah, he had a bit, stronger. He was a wee bit more resilient physically. I did think at the time that Real seemed a bit early, for him to go there, but they're always confident about. I mean, currently they're taking Endrick on. They took Vinicius at a very young age, and they're very confident in their ability to stick with a player. And once they decide, I mean, how much criticism over the year did Benzema have? But Perez was like, nope, he's the number 9 at Real Madrid, so live with it to various managers. But he was, again, it's nice to go back and do these shows, because that sort of 97, 98 Anelka, you really did think the world is at this. And I was always surprised that France never took him that year. England took Owen and France didn't take Anelka. And France, I mean, they win it, so they were right. But you're not telling me he wouldn't have been a better option than Guy Varche.
Or Dugarry, yeah.
As a total waste, though, I think of, not a total waste, but as a waste of a talent, I think, and it's fine. No one's saying he's absolutely terrible and he should be. He's done nothing at all. I think you can have achieved things, and you can be happy with your lot, but you can also have pretty reasonably went on and did a hell of a lot more. And it's not necessarily with Anelka injury issues in the same way that Owen just got completely killed with the explosiveness and he couldn't do anything about it. Anelka never really had many major injuries. It was all
his Anelkiness
attitude, which makes it a waste, I think, as well, because that's a player that should be winning multiple Champions Leagues, should be winning
Ballon d'Ors,
multi numbers of leagues, Ballon d'Ors, should be in those conversations in the same way that Henry was. And I think, I'm sure he did say himself he regretted leaving Arsenal. I think he blamed the press as well, which I guess meant he would always get a pretty unfavourable rap in Britain anyway, which put him in a hiding to nothing. But I think as well he'll probably look back and see what his successor did and how well he's revered it.
It's a reminder it's a reminder of talent, natural attributes, intelligence, but you have to want it. You have to have that chip of ice. You need to be a professional. You just need to want more and more and more goals and medals rather than money, perhaps, and change. Anyway, and why didn't go well? I mean, I'm sure France played England a friendly at Wembley spring of '98, and he absolutely ripped them apart, which he was reminded about in the Arsenal dressing room when he went back, I think, in no uncertain terms. Okay, then, Adam, you mentioned Del Bosque's patching up that midfield in kind of weird way last week. The defence looks like a lot of kind of Mr. Real Madrid's in there. And a wee bit of love also for Raul and Morientes, who, again, it's hard to hate. He's just got he's a lovely player, and he's obviously going to do the biz in this particular final. Was Del Bosque a precursor to Ancelotti, and just come in and work with what you have, but work with a way that gets people absolutely on side in a circus of a club, and just not being unruffled, just moving?
Yeah, I think it's a great shout. I think he's the perfect type of manager for this type of club, and I think we've seen the same with Ancelotti there as well. Better, I guess, than the personality managers or the very, very strict managers. Capello, for example, I think isn't really a natural fit there. They've tried to go with maybe more tactically astute managers as well, and it doesn't quite work because of the player power type thing. I think it takes a very, very special person, and I think really Jose Mourinho is the only one that's really got the Madrid players to suck it up and play a style of football that they all probably thought was beneath them. Really, and it would take a very, very special personality to be able to do that in the way that he did. So I think Del Bosque is just the absolute opposite of that, in the same way that Ancelotti is. It's coming in and mastering a lot of egos. I mean, despite Madrid, they won the Champions League a couple of years before. They weren't doing fantastically, but they needed someone like that coming in. He'd been there for a long time as well, so he had that continuity. He'd been there in various capacities for over 20 years or so. In this 4-year period, up until that sort of bookend, that 2003 Old Trafford, as you mentioned, he wins 2 Champions Leagues, 2 La Ligas, the Super Cup, the Spanish Cup as well. So he does have quite a bit of success, and obviously, famously, in his final season, wins the Liga, doesn't win the Champions League, and they sack him in that sort of uncompromising way that Madrid do. But yeah, I think he is absolutely perfect here. In terms of the tactics, I think I mentioned he switched to that back three for the Old Trafford game, and he didn't really deviate from it, certainly in Europe in the Bayern games as well. It's a back three. It's quite an interesting set up, this back three. It was all basically to get Salgado and Roberto Carlos free. And when you think, I guess, of the comparison with Valencia, who are very narrow, their fullbacks can get forward but don't necessarily play in this sort of way, then it almost played into Madrid's hands in this game, because you've got Keylor Gonzalez and Mendieta kind of caught between two stools of going out and covering for Salgado and Roberto Carlos to make sure they don't overload Angloma and the Valencia left back, whoever that was. But then you've also got Ivan Campo, Ivan Higuera and Carranca at the back, who can deal quite comfortably with Angulo, Lopez, Gerrard's late runs, anything like that, because they've got that spare man. So, in a way, they sort of managed to work around the fact that they have a midfield three essentially of Fernando Redondo, Steve McManaman, and Raul, which is just
that's
crazy.
That is crazy, really. We talked about this Valencia midfield control and strength and strangling team with their movement and creativity and intelligence. I mean, if you're playing Championship Manager, or you don't put that together, it's just poor Redondo's just get too much there. But
you've got an AML and F/SC. You can't put that in a midfield together.
Let's go to the final then. Let's actually talk about the final game in Paris, the Stade de France. We've talked about Valencia, Adam, being explosive at home. They've thrashed Barcelona. They've thrashed Lazio. They've beaten Fiorentina. They've beaten Rangers. They've beaten PSV Eindhoven. They've drawn with Bayern Munich. They've drawn with Manchester United. They have not lost in the Mestalla. This is not the Mestalla. And it's a big game. And it's Real Madrid. And they just don't quite turn up. Is it just as simple as that? Because that game, I'm just looking at the lineups on my other screen as they're set out on the night, that should not work for Real Madrid.
It shouldn't. But what I think was quite interesting about it as well was that Madrid almost sort of, they showed them respect, I guess, and they changed the way that they played. You think of, I guess that final that we've just had again, to go back to that point. There are some comparisons there, because Ancelotti has changed the way that Bellingham plays over the last few months of the season, and almost made him, I don't know how you would describe it, sometimes a right-sided central midfielder in a diamond, and sometimes the number 10, and sometimes the second striker. It's a very fluid role, and it probably, Ancelotti's a master of getting things to work, to get things over the line. I think Del Bosque was the same here, because although he moved to that back three against Man United, what he did in the final was quite unselfish as well, or he got some of the players to play quite unselfishly, because he had Anelka and Morientes up front, but he had them working off the ball in a way that you certainly wouldn't think of Nicolas Anelka doing that. Even Morientes as well. He's not the type of striker to me that would be tracking back. And it was all predicated on stopping that overload, or stopping Gonzalez and Kelly Gonzalez and Mendy getting on the ball, because a 3-5-2 versus a 4-4-2, you've obviously got the four on the sides for Valencia, and then you've only got Salgado and Roberto Carlos here. So what he did then was he let them split, and they covered the angles. They made sure there was no overloads there, and they really got a lot of joy from it in this game. Salgado sets up Morientes' his goal, and you see, by any means necessary, Madrid, Roberto Carlos with that monster long throw for the second goal, which gets cleared, and McManaman scissor kicks the goal in as well. So it certainly worked for them. They were able to, I guess, play Valencia at their own game there, and it was all because of a little tweak by Del Bosque, but also this thing about getting big players and big egos to do unselfish things for the team that maybe other managers wouldn't quite be able to do. I mean, Nicolas Anelka being to run the channels and not be the match winner in the game. I guess it takes a special manager to be able to do those things, and it sums up Del Bosque and Madrid.
Bolton Wanderers, Blackburn Rovers, Middlesbrough, all links to this final, and players that are playing in it. Yeah, it just doesn't happen for Valencia. Davy, Morientes with an opportunistic header, which he's so good at. I loved Morientes a lot.
So did I. He's underrated, isn't he?
Yeah, but it's all Real. That's in the first half. McManaman scores a goal that he nearly scored in the first half. This kind of low volley on the edge of the box. This one goes in, and then Raul with a kind of rounding the keeper, but still, imagine you find the most acute of angle and cut it back across. It was perfectly done. It was a very, very comfortable night in the end for Real Madrid. Maka then, Davey, because this was a big story at the start of that season, him going. England had used the Bosman ruling to get players in. This was probably the first English player anyway. John Collins had gone to Monaco from Celtic and kind of stiffed him. But this was the first time someone had left for nothing really. On 110 grand a week or 91,000 pound a week, something in that kind of bracket, which was stupendous at that time. It was a big moment because it felt like, you know, the Premier League on this ascendancy, and then one of its players has left for money that no Premier League team is really offering.
Yeah, because this was the dawn, if you like. People had signed players on Bosman's, but this was now players' agents saying, well, hang on a minute. If you'd went to sign Steve McManaman in that era, you'd be, what, 20 million maybe? 15 to 20? Round about that. Well, you're saving so much that you're going to have to pay him a big chunk of that. And now that's standard. You know, players run down their contract because they feel that will boost their, and it does, because obviously the buying club are quite happy. They don't need to shell out a transfer fee, so they would rather pay you a percentage of a transfer fee over your contract, which again is also handy because it's over a contract rather than potentially up front or whatever. But there was shock, and again it was that you hate to dump on the UK, but there was that very kind of small-minded thing of almost how dare he. You know, I remember reading articles at the time, and you can imagine the type of journalists. It was like the Custuses and the those sort of Rob Draper, those sort of guys that Liverpool gave him a chance, and all of that kind of stuff, as if anybody doesn't leave a job where their wages get quadrupled. But also I think that it's the one thing that English football took a while to, and now it has, I think, which is that Real Madrid are the biggest club in the world, and they can outbid you. And they are the club that, if they come in for a player, you are not getting him. And there have been times over the last 20 years where England can blow anyone out the water financially. They can pay money that nobody else can, etc. If Real Madrid go for a player, Mbappe this summer is a great example. He's going to Real Madrid because they wanted him, and it was that simple. People grow up dreaming, particularly European players, grow up dreaming of playing for Real Madrid. That's the dream. That's where they want to go. And English football took a while to sort of accept that it's the best league in the world, it's the richest league in the world. It can get any player, with the exception of players who Real Madrid want. And now, as I say, they've accepted that. And we've seen so many players over the years go now from the EPL to Real Madrid that it's common. This final to me is fascinating because I go back, there was this thing before the Champions League called the European Cup, right? Honestly, there was, Adam. I promise you. But 1979, Nottingham Forest won it. 1980, first round, Liverpool, the English champions, draw Nottingham Forest. And Graham Souness said, we would have beat any team in Europe, any team, we would have won it. He said, except Nottingham Forest, because they always beat us. That's exactly what happens here. Right? That's exactly what happens here. And he was right, by the way. Forest knocked them out 2-0 and 0-0. And in this one, it's exactly the same as that. Valencia play the badge. They don't play the 11. There's no way that Valencia team are as bad. They choke. I mean, I don't mean to be nasty, but they choke. They don't show up at all. None of the things that we've praised them for take place. The explosiveness that you mentioned isn't there. There's a fearfulness about them. There's a reluctance. They're not in sync. They're not doing the right things. They allow Madrid to play the game they want to. And Adam's right. Del Bosque nullifies them. And I think that second goal that he mentioned there is a great example, isn't it? Bobby Carlos turning into Dave Challinor and just launching the ball, because Real Madrid are in a final. And when Real Madrid are in the final, they win it, and they'll do anything that they need to do to win it. But they are aided and abetted by a really piss-poor performance from Valencia. And there is a lot of regret in Valencia still. Now, obviously, the following year, spoiler alert, they get to the final and they come very, very, very close. There's more regret about this one because there is the sense of we did not deliver anywhere close to what we were capable of. And they didn't. That was the thing. They didn't, because the aura of Real Madrid is huge to anyone. We have literally just witnessed it as we record this, that everybody knew what was going to happen in that final. And as Dortmund began to miss chances, we were messaging each other. Well, we all know what's coming here. That aura exists for everyone, but it's even greater for Spanish sides who live with it every single day.
I do. I can buy that. I absolutely can buy that, especially after the last 20 years of what we've seen for Real Madrid in this competition. It would never happen. Like, I can't believe a Champions League final being selected for the Mestalla in advance. But they'll win that at home. I don't care who they're playing. They will beat Real Madrid at home. I think it would be the occasion, the opposition for sure. But what made
it's in their head, isn't it?
What made Valencia tick and really impress was how they were at home. And again, I can't impress enough. I don't think I've really been in a stadium like it, to be honest. Just how noisy it is and how much they fed off that, and therefore it less about the occasion than the badge. And I think it's just neutral venue just nullified them, and they just looked so sterile really on the night.
Sterile is a great word for it.
Champions League final or European Cup final between two clubs of the same country. We're going to see that obviously again as time goes on. But this is the new world, Adam, that we're in terms of this move towards, which is really a Super League. You had doubts about this season prior to recording and research. You didn't these kind of lost years before we kind of kick into 2004 maybe onwards. Have you revised that? Because I have loved going back here, maybe more so than a lot of the others that we've done so far. There's other reasons why I love a lot of the mid-90s stuff and early 90s stuff, but in terms of what football should be, quality, drama, excitement, entertainment, contest, hundreds of contests, just continued contest. The finals is maybe a bit of an anticlimax, but apart from that, I think this tournament is a top-class edition of the Champions League.
Yeah, I think I probably just had the final in my head, I think, when I was thinking about that. But you're right, the amount of goals, the fun in the second group stage, the amount of goals in the knockouts, a couple of relative shocks, I guess, as well. It has been fun. I'll keep the theme up and say maybe we are getting into it over the next couple of shows as well, and hopefully it kind of changes my mind. In my head, I feel like we are coming into a period now where there is a little bit of a transition. We're not quite at the stage of Serie A falling off a cliff, but we're definitely coming towards it, and we're not quite at the stage of Mourinho and Benitez. So in my head, it's going to be a lean couple of years. So I'm looking forward to seeing where it comes. Just a final point on McManaman. I guess I think it was a really good move for him, because obviously Liverpool underachieving, but you could sort of get pigeonholed as being a Premier League player and nice and flashy and maybe not as much pressure playing for Liverpool, but going there, I guess, and moving from being one of the main men in a team to being a bit of a cog kind of team and having to do the dirty work and sometimes playing central midfield and tracking back and all that sort of stuff. I think it maybe humbles you a little bit, and it certainly made him a better player. He was really, really clever as a player at Madrid, a little bit different to how he was at United. I guess you could say the same at Liverpool. Sorry, I guess you could say the same about Beckham when he goes as well. It probably humbles you, becoming a cog in a team rather than being the main man. So I think it's a really good move for him, and the first one in a long time, wasn't it, to move from England to Spain. So it was a really, I guess, a brave move for him as well. And obviously it paid off with winning the Champions League in his first season.
Davey, how's it been for you?
A bit of a rethink, actually. I think I just failed this, and I didn't like that, and I think that I had just bought into, well, if it was that good, they would have stuck with it, that kind of thing. But I very much have had to go back and say, well, actually, there were so many great games, and I'm getting kind of caught up in the excitement I felt at the time. you know, I mentioned earlier, it made me want to go and watch one of these games, which I think is a great sign. I understand why they got rid of it because of the amount of football that was being played. It'll be interesting to see what we get next year in this new format again. But there were just so many good sides and so many teams who you felt were capable if they turned up, if they performed. And I love tournaments where 15 bad minutes of a tournament that's 17 games can cost you. And you might be the best side in it. You might be the form side, but 15 bad minutes, such is the quality you're up against, that if you get that wrong, and this side is absolutely packed with that. Also, seeing a very, very simple, when I went back and watched highlights and picked out various games, I'd urge listeners to go do it. There's some amazing goals.
Oh, no.
Keepers still can't
goalkeep
particularly well.
We're not quite got there, have we, yet? But
No.
not really moved on for the first episode of the show when Adam bemoaned the lack of goalkeeping quality in 92-93. But it does get better, I'm pretty sure. I've loved the last 3 weeks. Thank you, boys. A wee bit like Adam, my memory of the 0-1 final isn't particularly good. And for that reason, and the fact that Rangers disappointed rather than were just very unlucky, maybe sours my memory of that particular year. And the stuff I just have blocked out, other than Bayern's redemption, I guess, against United, Leeds United having a big old run to the semi-finals. So there's plenty I am desperate to get stuck into next season and next week. But thank you, Davey.
Yeah, won't come as a surprise. I didn't really enjoy the season 2000-2001, so that may have soured me on it. But that's why I love going back and remember, because I did watch it all. That's the thing. No matter how disappointed I was with life at home, I would always seek solace in the quality of the football that was played. But I'm very interested to see the evolution of this Valencia side. Was it the same? Because they didn't have the surprise quality, but yet they managed to make the final again. So how did they do it? And I'm looking forward to hearing Adam explain that.
Thank you, Adam.
Yeah, been good. I think the 3 episodes has been definitely a good change for it. It just lets us split it out a little bit more, particularly how that second group stage came alive. We couldn't really have done that justice, or if we had, it would have probably ended up being 4 hours long for 2 shows. So yeah, I think that's a good move. And yeah, once again, thanks everyone for their comments on the Q&As. We'll look at doing another one of those in about 5 Champions League years, which at this rate is probably going to be about Christmas. But yeah, we'll certainly get on it. But yeah, once again, thank you, and yeah, thanks for having me. It's been great.
It's been good fun. We look to 2000 and 2001. Imagine winning your first 2 games, drawing your next, and still not qualifying out the group. Until next week, bye for now.